Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Metropolitan Action Commission, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the Metropolitan Action Commission the Executive Director of the Commission, Mr. Walter Hunt. And of course, Mr. Hunt, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. I'm so pleased to be back to chat with you again.
You know, I think it's a good time, Mr. Hunt, to talk about the Metropolitan Action Commission. I know that folks are familiar with it as an organization, but I hope this morning that we can give them some information relative to what you're involved in. But before we do that, let's talk about Walter Hunt. Let's have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of eventually leading you to the executive directorship of the Metropolitan Action Commission, after which we'll talk about the commission and some of the other things that you believe to be important. Let's start off there.
I'd be happy to. You know, I've had a career that has been just glorious. I started out at the as a paratrooper with the 101st Airborne Division right out of high school, and after that, of course, I came and matriculated at Tennessee State University, where I first met you, by the way. After graduating TSU, I was fortunate enough to get a job with a congressman, and I spent 10 years in Congress working on various community issues, which was a very, very learning experience, a good learning experience. And following that, I came back from Congress and I worked in the mayor's office for an opportunity for a short time. And from there on into the directorship of the Metropolitan Action Commission. But let me say that during my tenure in Congress was the eye-opening about the community needs and what category of people who really need the services. We find that in every city, in every state, there are the underemployed, the undereducated, and they need assistance. It's not that there are just people who are down and out. These are great people who just need some assistance, get pointed in the right direction. And that was the experience that I got in the period that I was working in Congress.
These are the so-called working poor.
Working poor, exactly, exactly. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, how we handle that. But after coming back from Congress, then I was able to work in the mayor's office. There and again, I had an opportunity to work in the community, to look at the community needs, to look at job, affordable housing, and employment opportunities and things of that nature. From there, I went down to the Metropolitan Action Commission and became director there. It didn't take me long to see that that same need was there in the Nashville community, and that agency deals with those unemployed, uneducated individuals directly. When I first took over as director of the Metropolitan Action Commission, we had 478 students in the Head Start program. We were able to increase that number to about 1,200. I have about 264 employees, and my role now is still trying to find out how best to help these people that need the services.
You know, I think, Mr. Hunt, in terms of the Metropolitan Action Commission itself, I think what would be quite instructive in terms of the number of people that you serve is to give us some idea about that commission. I know that Head Start and other programs that you've talked about on a number of occasions, I know that all of these are programs that came out of the 60s. But what about the commission? I mean, where do you put that in terms of its social responsibilities?
Its responsibility of that commission is to look at the needs of the community, to create programs to meet those needs. And you're right, the program started in 1964 under President Johnson's administration to take a look at how we could eradicate poverty. Poverty has been with us since the beginning of time, but we have made some great gains in trying to help people out of poverty. The agency in itself is a safety net. It's not so much a welfare agency because we don't give people stipends on a monthly basis. we look at a program that an individual may want to participate in, and we will give them that assistance at that particular time, and that person cannot use that program again for a 12-month period.
So it is a real assistance program. I mean, there's nothing permanent about the aid that you render.
There's nothing permanent about it, and then we have various programs, but an individual can come in and use each program at least once the program year. This allows us to provide the service across the community rather than giving one family or one individual all of the services. But the most amazing thing about that program or the agency, anyone can qualify for assistance of that program because it tends to pick up where an individual left off. For instance, if an individual is working like 10 years, been working 10 years, and they, for no fault of their own, break a leg, get sick, or have family problems, and they lose a portion of income, if not all the income, then they can come in and get assistance for that for that program, even if they were making $50,000 a year before they got injured. You see, so it's a real safety net to kind of shoot the gaps, to keep a family or an individual going during that time of hardship.
And so the Metropolitan Action Commission really serves a real need, but now is it supported primarily by the federal government or by the metropolitan government, or where does the majority of the monies come from that you use to operate this program?
The majority of the funds of the Metropolitan Action Commission comes from the federal government. About 95–97% of the funds are provided by the federal government. They do have a clause in there in the Head Start program where the city has to match it by 25% on the dollar. So that's what we call local dollars. And we're getting toward that full match, hopefully under this administration. It has not happened in the past. So therefore, it's been a very limited program in terms of what we can do administratively and in terms of the operating budget. But when we get the full budget in there, I think we'll be able to provide even more services.
And so there's a possibility of you being able to increase what you're doing in terms of reaching out and touching those, the so-called working poor, now with some of the new developments. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You see, what has happened, like I said, we have grown since 1988 by 70–75%. However, the operating budget has not kept up that pace because we've not been able to get the local dollars. I think we have a commitment under this administration to get those local dollars, so therefore, you're right, we'll be able to buy more supplies for the students, provide more services for the needy, assist more senior citizens, and expand the program overall.
You know, I think one of the most important elements in the Metropolitan Action Commission has to be Head Start. And of course, we have only a minute before our first commercial break here, Mr. Hunt, and I don't want to raise any questions dealing with that and then have to interrupt you. But really what I think we'd like to do today in dealing with Head Start is to talk about some of your experiences and some of the things that you found dealing with the education of young children. That is to, you know, you've been involved in this a long time in Head Start, and you've been involved with Head Start and et cetera. Perhaps by the end of the show, we can at least leave with some impression in reference to what we have to do in order to educate our young children, and some of the things that you have seen that we need to do, or some of the things that we shouldn't do, and let's do it from that perspective. I think that with all of your experiences in Head Start and with the program and et cetera, we should be able to do that, and we'll do that when we come back during this second segment. And of course, we'll be back with you following this short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is the Metropolitan Action Commission, and we're talking to the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Action Commission, Mr. Walter Hunt. And of course, Mr. Hunt, before we had our first commercial break, I think we sort of promised that we would give you an opportunity during the second segment to talk about education within the frameworks of the Metropolitan Action Commission. And so let's do that. Let's have you to talk about it from whatever perspective you wish to use.
Well, I think the Head Start program is the most important program that we've ever experienced. It's the only program that I recall surviving both parties, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, and the program has really grown. We, across the state of Tennessee, have served about 1 million students since the program was created. Just across Tennessee. We've done probably about 750,000 right here in Nashville alone. But let me say, first of all, how important this program is, because about 3 years ago, there were no mandatory kindergarten laws in the state of Tennessee. So therefore, the undereducated, some young poor kids did not have an opportunity to go to preschools because they couldn't afford it. So they were sitting at home for the most part, waiting until they become of age to enter the first grade. By that time, they was 2 years behind. They recognized this years ago, and the program, the Head Start program, although it is a national program, actually started right here in Nashville by a lady by the name of Susan Gray, and she took that concept to Sergeant Shriver in Washington, and it was developed at that point. But since that time, the program, as I said, has grown tremendously. One of the things that we find in a lot as early as the Head Start students is some of the same problems that we see in the older kids today. They have sometimes a lack of self-esteem, lack of direction, because they've not had that kind of training. So when we look at the students that we have put through the Head Start program, they tend to do better in school. They are more adept to learning. They are less apt to get into drugs because they have a greater sense of direction, as opposed to students who do not have that opportunity. Right now, we estimate that there are 3,000 students that we still need to pick up, and that's what if we ever expand, we will go after some additional students, because I think it's important. It's very important. We are doing what we call a transitional study now to see how well the Head Start students are doing in public schools versus the students who didn't have the opportunity to go to Head Start.
You know, I think that's an interesting question. And of course, I think that you've been involved long enough, and I think you've already hinted at the fact that you sort of believe that this program not only is important in bringing those school children into some kind of school setting, but I think you've also hinted at the fact that perhaps this might be an excellent kind of program that bridge that gap. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're trying to document now?
That's exactly what I'm saying. We're looking at how well the students that attended Head Start perform in the public school system. So our study will go from K through 2. We'll look at that three grades in the public school, and then we'll compare that with the students who did not have an opportunity to go to the Head Start program. But one of the most amazing things about the Head Start program, we get a chance to see it in the reverse. What I mean by that, we have another program at the Metropolitan Action Commission called the Self-Sufficiency Program. These students that we're getting basically are students who are high school dropouts, and their ages range from 18 to 30 years of age. Now, what we see in this group is the same thing that we're trying to give the Head Start students in that group, but this group missed it. So in essence, we are just having to back this group up, realizing that they're adults, but we're doing some of the same things for this group as we're doing for Head
They
Start.
still lack self-esteem, they lack
Self-esteem.
responsibility, they lack the same things that you're trying to start these young children with.
Right.
These older ones simply missed that somewhere. Is that,
and that's absolutely, and that's what we're dealing with now with the students that we have in the self-sufficiency program that are 18 and beyond. At that point, it's just like having to restart them all over again, you know. And once we restart them, the majority of them will do a great job. Matter of fact, we put 22 people or students in college last year out of the self-sufficiency program that did not have an idea that they were even going to school until we recruited them, talked them into them. We have two wonderful instructors, Dr. Collins, she's the teacher, the mom, everything they need. And we give them that basic concept of what learning is all about, and then they take off. Now, when we bring them in there, we have 3 divisions of that self-sufficiency program. If they're reading below a 7th grade level, and we test their reading level with the TABE test, and if they're reading below the 7th grade level, then we will put them in the adult basic education program until we get their reading skills up. After the reading skills get higher, then we'll transfer them or graduate them, as we call it, over to the GED with the rest of them. That in itself gives them the catalyst, the excitement to do a better job over here in the GED, and most of them will do a great job. Now, just before they get ready to take the GED test, we start talking college. Because I have found over the years that I can get all the people in Nashville who don't have a high school diploma and say, come on, I'm gonna give you a GED certificate, and they get the GED certificate, and I let them walk out the door, then they're not gonna know what to do with it. So we have to keep them, track them, carry them further, and that's how we were able to put 22 people in college.
And so you've got an accelerated learning program that's based upon program learning and many other things in terms of testing them, and then with the ultimate objective of perhaps doing the GED and then entering into higher education. Is that
yeah, it's a more accelerated, but it's still one step at a time.
Okay.
But we just don't talk ABE.
Let me interrupt you here, and of course we'll be back with you following this short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to this final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Walter Hunt, the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Action Commission. And of course, Mr. Hunt, this final segment, let's give you an opportunity to sort of wrap up the Metropolitan Action Commission today and to give us some of the new programs and some of the other programs that you've not had an opportunity to talk about. Let's do that, and I think we'll have a full show today.
Well, you know, one of the things that's often said about the Metropolitan Action Commission that it is probably one of the best kept secrets in Nashville. Although they say it's the best kept secret, we probably serve about 180,000 people a year right at that one location. But we do offer a lot of other programs. One of the programs I'm very, very fond of is the programs we have for our senior citizens. You see, I strongly believe that we have to take care of our young folks and our senior citizens. So, of course, I think a lot of people know about the fan program and the air conditioning programs that we use in the summertime to keep our senior citizens cool. But one of the most recent programs that we created was that of the maintenance of the senior citizens' homes. We looked at a study that said that senior citizens are more happier, they are more healthier, they live longer when they're able to stay in their own home and not have to be forced out in a nursing home. One of the reasons when we looked at it, a lot of the reasons that they were moving out, being put in homes because of they couldn't afford to pay for the maintenance on the home, i.e. roofs, plumbing, electrical, and that kind of thing. So we created a program where we can spend about $3,000 per house, whether it's a roof or electrical or plumbing, handicap accessories, or subflooring. So we started that program 2 years ago. Last year we did 60 some odd homes. This year we're on off to a good start. We're putting roofs on the people's houses. We providing that maintenance so that they are able to stay in their house and not have to move out.
Now, what about this training? There seems to be a training component to this that would be important too. Who's providing all of that work? I mean, is that work being done by independent contractors, or do you use the folks that you're working with in order to do that?
Right now, our caseworkers are the one that processes it, but the people who actually do the work are the small and minority business people, contractors that are already on the Metro's bidding list. And we're looking at Tennessee State's engineering department to do some work in that field too. We just started that process, and that was suggested by one of your good friends, Dr. Kevin Atchison, and said that we should look at TSU, other colleges have these engineering students that they could provide some of the work also. So we're in the process of doing that also. And
so you see a bright future for the Metropolitan Action Commission in terms of its service to the community. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think that in the direction that the commission is going, it can only get better. We got a tremendous staff there. We got a dedicated staff. They are not clock watchers. They really work. They try to solve people's problems. And I think that as long as I continue to have the staff that we have, that it's going to get better.
Now, what are some of the things that you would say over the last 2.5 minutes that we have here, Mr. Hunt? What are some of the things that if you had to deal with some of the needs that you found to be pressing in terms of what you're doing at the Metropolitan Action Commission, what would some of those things be?
Oh, it would definitely have to be education. You know, I think that the undereducated, underemployed is drained on the system. Now, I'm not saying that it is anybody's fault, because, you know, college is not made for everybody, but you at least got to get that person up where they can support themselves and live a true quality of life that we believe that's everybody's right.
And so education would be one of the most pressing things that you feel that you could deal with, and if you had the resources necessary, you would reach out into that area.
Absolutely, because see, right now we don't have a mechanism or an agency where we could go out and say, come, we'll show you how to get jump start, we'll show you what the education system about, we will show you what you missed when you was in school, and it's going to be easier the second time around. That's the message that we give.
Well, I think, Mr. Hunt, during this last minute that we have here, I can only say that we've had many opportunities to talk to people from the commission, and we've talked to you on many occasions. And I think in terms of the way the politics is going today, that your program is a very, very viable program, and the needs that we have in the state of Tennessee for education itself, I think, have already been demonstrated. And it seems that you've got almost a private kind of program in a real sense in terms of your resources and where. Speaking of resources, over the last half minute here, what are some of the support mechanisms that you would think that you would need in terms of resources? In
terms of resources, I think that if I had additional space, additional literacy teachers to deal with the 30,000 literacy cases that we have throughout the city, I think that would be just magnificent.
And all of that would be additional resources for you, and you could do many, many more things.
Absolutely.
Okay, and of course, let me thank you for coming by and giving us that excellent information about the Metropolitan Action Commission. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.